Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the remarkable and honestly emotionally taxing memoir, Rome Sweet Home by Scott and Kimberly Hahn. Now, this book gives us a deeply personal look at a couple navigating some really profound shifts in their core convictions. We're talking about the kind of shifts that force you to reevaluate absolutely everything you've built your life upon. So, let's start with a really fascinating question. How exactly does a staunchly anti-Catholic Presbyterian minister transform into one of the most prominent defenders of the Catholic faith? I mean, that is a massive paradigm shift. And to really understand it, we have to look past just the theology and focus on the human beings actually living through it. Because, this wasn't just some dry intellectual exercise confined to a seminary library. It caused a severe, devastating marital crisis. Just listen to Kimberly Hahn's words describing her feelings of deep betrayal. She felt like she had committed a foul and traitorous misdeed. That really shows you the intense personal cost of this journey. She truly felt like the ground had just entirely fallen out from under their shared life. All right, let's get into Section 1, Early Faith and Marriage. To understand where they ended up, we need to look at where they started, because it's literally a night and day contrast. Scott's path was super turbulent. He had a nominal Protestant background marked by a rebellious youth that even landed him in juvenile court. But then he had this sudden radical conversion to Christ. Kimberly, on the other hand, had a totally solid foundation. She was raised in a devout Christian home and had a personal epiphany way back in the 7th grade that set her on the steady, lifelong path of devotion. But despite having such different starting lines, they came together to form this incredibly powerful united front. When they got married in August of 1979, they made a covenant to put Jesus at the absolute center of their lives. They enrolled at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary together, deeply unified in their evangelical Reformed theology. And this is crucial for our story. They shared a zealous, highly active mission to evangelize Catholics who they sincerely believed were just misinformed about true Christianity. Which brings us to Section 2, the Covenant's Revelation. Okay, so the turning point of this whole narrative really hinges on one specific word, covenant. Well, actually, scratch that. It's not just the word, it's what it actually means. As Scott dove deeper into his seminary studies, his understanding shifted. He went from viewing a covenant as just a mere legal contract to seeing it as a secret, life-giving familial bond and personal exchange. And this total redefinition became the theological wedge. It sparked an insatiable intellectual curiosity for Scott and a growing, really profound anxiety for Kimberly. And man, this single concept spread like wildfire through their belief system, forcing them to completely reevaluate their foundational Protestant doctrines. For example, contraception shifted in their minds from being a personal choice to profaning the life-giving marital covenant. Justification, or sola fide, transitioned from being a legal contract by faith alone to an invitation into God's family. Even the bedrock principle of sola scriptura, the idea that the Bible is the sole authority, was suddenly challenged by a new belief that tradition and church authority were actually necessary to guide the family of God. Let's move on to Section 3, Scott's Path to Rome. Driven by this intense, almost magnetic desire for truth, Scott basically goes down a historical rabbit hole studying the early church fathers. This deep dive led him to realize the necessity of the Eucharist in liturgy and worship, and his conviction grew so strong, so undeniably loud, that he took the monumental step of resigning from his pastoral position simply because he felt he could no longer teach with integrity. Ultimately, attending Mass at Gesu Parish provided him with a profound spiritual awakening. He essentially hit a point of no return. Scott felt this undeniable pull, saying he had reached a point where to delay obedience would be disobedience, and that he just wanted to come home. He concluded that resisting this theological calling any longer, despite the immense pain it was causing his family, would be fundamentally disobedient to God. And that transitions us into a really tough part of the story. Section 4, the mixed faith marriage. You can just imagine the friction at home, right? It was absolutely intense. On one side of the house, you have Scott experiencing profound spiritual joy, a deep awe of the Eucharist, and the relief of finally finding his home. But on the flip side, Kimberly felt entirely alienated. She was dealing with crushing feelings of betrayal, deep isolation, and profound grief over the shared ministry dreams that they had literally built their marriage upon. They were living in the same house, but existing in two completely different spiritual universes. And we have to remember, this wasn't just a quick overnight phase. They got married in 1979, and Scott converted at the Easter Vigil in 1986. But Kimberly? She didn't convert to Catholicism until 1990. So we are looking at an agonizing 4-year gap, where Scott was attending Mass all alone. That is a period of time that required immense marital endurance, incredibly open communication, and a whole lot of grace from both of them just to keep their family intact. But right in the middle of their darkest season of isolation, which, by the way, included the heartbreaking pain of miscarriages, the birth of their daughter Hannah acted as this beautiful, totally unexpected turning point. Kimberly even called her a child of reconciliation, because to her own absolute surprise, Kimberly found profound joy and a real sense of participation during Hannah's Catholic baptism. It was like a door cracking open in her heart.
Let's dive into Section 5, Reunited in Catholicism.
Now, Kimberly's path to Rome was entirely her own, and honestly, it was a slow burn. It kicked off with that new appreciation for the baptismal liturgy, which was huge because it helped shift their marriage from fierce, exhausting theological debates back to engaging in loving dialogue. Then came the really difficult hurdle of confronting and eventually accepting Marian doctrines. But ultimately, experiencing the Easter Vigil for herself completed the transition. Step by step, she moved from seeing the Catholic Church as a barrier to viewing it as the living body of Christ.
And her journey culminated in this incredibly powerful realization. She said, "Your love has broken through, O God. Why were you doing this to me? To demonstrate your love for me." At the 1990 Easter Vigil, a full 4 years after her husband, Kimberly officially entered the church. She recognized that her grueling emotional journey wasn't a punishment, but an act of profound divine love and healing. So what is the big takeaway from all of this? Well, it's incredibly poetic. The very concept of the covenant that initially tore their world apart ultimately became the thing that brought them back together. They emerged from this fire with unity completely restored in their marriage. Their shared ministry was renewed, but now on a massive global scale. And they built a family life deeply centered around the Eucharist. The very trials that threatened to break them ultimately forged an even stronger bond. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty compelling question to chew on. How do differing foundational beliefs challenge, strain, or maybe ultimately strengthen the most intimate relationships in your own life? Whether you share the Hahn's theological conclusions or not, you have to admit, their story is an absolute masterclass in the power of core convictions and the incredible endurance of love. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope this gives you something profound to reflect on today.